that, you can always make things, I mean, most things you can make fine. And then your fruit and vegetables it looks better, and you don't have the problem with things like getting rotting on the ground or getting, bugs getting to them as easily. And there's ways to arrange the plants to make sure that certain ones that should have shade will get shade at certain parts of the day. There's ways to, there's companion planting, so some things really like to be next to other things, and some things really don't do well if they're next to another thing. I use just organic methods of both fertilization and soil amendments and pest control. And I did notice, Betsy, something ate your green bean leaves.
Already?
Well, actually, these are purple potted beans. But so obviously we will need to get something going in there.
Okay.
And then we also were talking about the overwinter things. Now I have there's 3 restaurants that I do their gardens for them, and one of them is Catashu, the one on Pennsylvania. And in the back there's this tiny little square, and there's a tree right over the top of it, and there's cement all around it, but it still is doing well. Last fall, I planted lettuce and radishes and carrots, and because we had such a mild winter, well, I went ahead and did a temporary greenhouse, which I'll tell you how that goes. And we undid it this spring, before even, like in February, and there was lettuce everywhere, carrots. I mean, it was amazing. It went through the whole, I mean, if we'd had a regular winter, it probably wouldn't have. But I went ahead, since it was so mild, I kept the greenhouse up the whole winter, and that's what we ended up with. It was very neat. The greenhouse is merely, I put some tubing down in the soil, and then run a PVC pipe to another tube, and then you attach plastic over it, and that's it. And it's something that you can take down and put back up. You just leave your little tubes in here, and it really does work well. It's for people who want to get, lettuce in, early April or even maybe late March. You can do that. So basically today, I just want to answer people's questions, and I mean, everybody has problems with pests here and there. Everybody has, some things they have trouble growing, some things they do really well with. And Greg was talking about, he'll add stuff to the soil, and then the one thing he was targeting will do really well, but then something else won't do as well. So I'll help you guys with understanding that. And like I said, since I do just use organic methods, I also, I have some organic fertilizers and amendments that are vegan, and then I have some that are just, and the way I mean that is some of it is called blood meal, bone meal. Those things obviously are actually blood and bone, but then blood meal and bone meal.
But it's blood and bone of what?
And it's left over from slaughterhouses and that.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Oh,
I know. So I do have vegan, like rocks and things that are ground up into a powder that work really well. I do use eggshells, but all the eggs that I get are from my neighbor, free-range chickens. I eat the eggs all the time, and they're wonderful, and I have the eggshells, and I grind that up, and I'll talk about that as well. In fact, we saved this guy, this little tomato plant guy, to plant, and I'll show you what I do. This is a black tomato, or dark tomato. It's called Black Fintula, and I buy my tomatoes from a woman in Pendleton, and she's just wonderful. She's been growing them forever. And what you do, tomatoes and peppers are in the same family as our eggplant and tobacco. Didn't know that, I know, but we won't worry about that one. But the peppers and tomatoes, you do the same thing. When you put them in, what you do is, and I never wear gloves. I can't stand to wear gloves when I garden. But I already did mix this in with the soil. But what you do is you dig your hole down, and again, this is another great thing about this, bringing the soil in like this, because it's really nice and loose, and carrots do really well in this. You sprinkle the bottom with the powdered eggshell, and mix in some coffee grounds, used coffee grounds. They add nitrogen to the soil. You can also mix in a little bit of composted whatever. I use worm castings, a lot. I actually have a little worm poop, basically.
Oh, okay.
And it's called casting's a nice way of putting it, but it works great. I mean, it adds nitrogen. It's a good, great all-around fertilizer. So I use that. You mix those two things in there, and then a little bit of bone meal. Now, the other thing you can use instead of bone meal is something called rock phosphate. And I actually don't have any of that right now, but I'm getting it because I have not been able to find it like at retail around here. So I'll have to order it. But and you just sprinkle that at the bottom, mix it with the soil a little bit. This guy could use a little water. But when you plant something, unless a couple of things, they have trouble if you mess with their roots too much. Most of the time, the best thing to do, because when you start them, the roots automatically start going around, and they will actually strangle themselves if you don't break them up a little bit. So every time when I plant something, I usually break the roots up a little bit, and that's okay. The eggplant don't like it, but these guys are fine. Put it down and bury it in a little bit lower than you would than it was in the other container, and lightly. Now you always see people like pushing down on it, but you don't do that. It's better not to compact it. And that's the other thing I like about this garden, or even an in-ground bed. Make paths to the side, because the more you walk on the ground, the harder it is for plants to grow. It compacts the earth, and the roots can't get through it. And I mean, obvious things like carrots, but even other things, it's hard for them to get in there. And here I am standing right on your nasturtiums. Sorry. But, and you just get it in there. Now, one thing with tomatoes, and like zucchini, I mean, zucchini, people have so much zucchini in the summer you can't give it away. But what you do, and with anything else like cucumbers and even beans and that, you look in the V, some of these, like this guy here, there's a little leaf starting here that's called a sucker. I mean, it's kind of small right now, but reach in there and just pinch it off. And what that does is that the energy that it's using to grow, it won't go to that tiny little sucker. You don't want it. You want it to get bigger and stronger and not waste any energy on the little tiny growths. Don't be afraid to do that. The best way to do it is to pinch it off. Just pinch it off with your fingers. Don't rip it off, because then it'll peel it down and it'll hurt it. But if you have fingernails at all, just pinch it off. And that's the same too with flowers on it, like zucchini. You might have like 50 flowers on there of different, there might be some that started earlier. Well, go in there and pinch off some of the ones that you don't need 50 zucchinis. But when you pinch it off, the ones that do grow will grow faster, and they'll be better. And then you'll get another one. You can start another one, another group of them after that.
Kerry, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The reason that she's here in Hippie's garden is I want to grow things, and I like to eat a lot of veggies. I had no idea what I was doing. Can you repeat that for me, what you did with that tomato plant?
Oh yeah,
like how you find it, how you found the thing that you pinched off.
Oh yeah, okay. In the V, and there's one on each of these actually, but they're all really super small, so I can't actually. Oh no, here's one. This guy has a bigger one. In the V of it, I just take that little thing that's growing, that's a sucker, and just pinch it off.
Just pull it out.
Between your fingernails. Now I have like no fingernails because I garden so much without gloves that they look really bad. So but most people just do that and just take it off, and it'll be fine. Thank you.
I have one quick question.
Yes.
Can we grow wheatgrass?
I have not grown wheatgrass myself, but I would imagine it would not be that difficult.
Okay.
Any kind of grass thing like that is.
I've grown it before. It's super easy.
Yeah.
Is it?
I grew it in trays actually.
Oh.
Because it sprouts.
Yes.
Okay. Because that's, in fact, my wife just asked me that question, so I said.
Yeah, you could do that. You could do that in a container, easily, like she said, or just outside in a container. And since it's grass and lettuce, those type of things, their roots don't need as much depth. So you could even do it, like you said, in a shallow. Another thing with containers is that a lot of times, besides the grass and the lettuce and that sort of thing, people tend to go too small on their containers, or put too many things in. And I myself have in the past done an herb thing about this big and put like 4 herbs in. and that's just, it's not, you're not going to get the beautiful tall, you know, basil that's going to be up to here and full and beautiful. You won't get that with it. It's completely stunts the growth. Tomatoes, I recommend about at least 18 inches open, and then about at least the same for a tomato. I mean, even bigger than that would be even more wonderful. Only one tomato plant at a time. Cucumbers and zucchini and any kind of squash, the best time to harvest them is when they're about 6 inches long. And everybody who's ever grown zucchini before knows it finds those plugs. I mean, I've found them, I mean, ridiculous. And so if you just keep on them, and you're going to notice. I mean, zucchini squash kind of gets a bad name because it seems so flavorless. It's not, when you harvest it at the right time, it really is good. Very tasty. The kind of cucumber that I'm growing for Betsy and for a lot of people, it's called suyo lawn cucumber, and it has very few. I mean, the seeds are small, and it's only about that wide. It's not like a regular, and they do get longer. They almost look like the English cucumbers that you can buy at the store, and that's a wonderful one because you don't have suyo, S-U-Y-O, suyo long, and I think I've actually seen that. I think Whole Foods Market they have a great seed selection there. I've seen it there. I've seen it other places too. It's more common than it was a couple years ago. You know, I planted on Friday, and you can already see our little guys coming up already. We have carrots, and we have lettuce. Carrots and lettuce are hard to plant the seed, only because they go, I mean, it's hard, they're so tiny. It's hard to get them, and then you have to thin them out and all of that. Best thing to do is just shake them. I use empty spice jars that have the little top with the holes in it. That's what I keep them in, and I just kind of lightly shake it over. You let the lettuce grow till it's like about that big or so, and then harvest it and have a salad with that stuff you just harvested. You know, depending on what type. She likes leaf lettuce. I just planted a bunch of Butter Crunch. The heads will get about that big. So you have to just think about it. You don't need as much space with the leaf lettuce, but with the head, you know, just then let others grow and then harvest them when it starts looking a little crowded and give them some room. The carrots, they should be at least 2 or 3 inches apart. And this is so deep. Those carrots can get really long.
How long will it take, say, for example,
lettuce?
Yeah.
It takes about a month from planting to harvest, although the leaf lettuce might be less. Yeah, and the head lettuce, you can actually harvest the outer leaves as it grows. You don't have to wait for the whole head to be done. You can harvest the outer, as soon as it bolts, as soon as it gets that long stem, you know, or it gets a thick, the lettuce, if it's thick in the middle, you just take it out and plant. You know, I mean, you're done because it gets bitter as soon as that comes up. The other thing with lettuce is that you plant today, and then maybe a week or 2 weeks from now, sprinkle some more seeds out. So you'll have a constant lettuce. And same with carrots, and same with things like that. Other things like that, like radishes and that kind of thing that you really like.
So like the lettuce, you just you don't pull it out of the root.
You can cut it at
off.
the top. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you could, but you might disturb other things that are growing right there.
Okay.
You could certainly, and honestly, eventually that's just gonna rot and make the soil that much better. You know?
How would you grow the carrots again if you pull out the whole carrot? Because don't you grow carrots with the seeds?
Well, you have to get more seeds. Yes.
Oh, okay.
And the same with the lettuce. To wait for your lettuce to go to seed, it takes a long time.
Okay.
And it would, in a space, a smaller space like this, you don't want to waste it on that. I mean, lettuce
Right.
seeds are just easy, you know, to get. They have them everywhere. You just keep it. Well, you can. We were talking about that. You can cut it off right at the soil, or you can pull it out if you want, but you just don't want to disturb. If there's something growing right next to it, like a carrot, right next to it. If she had a head of lettuce, it'd be right here. The carrots are right here. So if she pulls that up, she might be so carrots. So you can just cut it. Yeah, it'll be good. Yeah, it'd be really good. Rot is good. Rot and yucky stuff and all that is wonderful. Yeah. What other question? I mean, what
So
other
it's
questions? I'm
like
sure you guys. Yeah.
with spinach, I mean, because I've got some species of spinach, I don't know what I grabbed, but it seems like it's a longer variety of leaf. Is it like, once it's big enough that I think it looks normal eating size, I mean, is there any like, with leaf lettuces, if they're too small, are they more bitter, or
No,
does
just
it change the
no.
taste?
They probably would be a little sweeter. It, it's when they bolt that they go. That's when it gets bitter. So, and the hotter it is, the quicker it bolts. With spinach is really a cooler weather one. So again, it won't do as well in the heat. If it has lots of shade, maybe it'll be okay. Like for instance, this goes like we're doing this with the sun. So maybe once this grows in, it wouldn't be a bad idea to spinach right here. It's gonna get some nice morning sun, but then it's gonna get shaded from the leaves of this guy. The peppers and tomatoes, they love the heat. They love the sun. Herbs they can go in poor soil and do well. Herbs are really easy. They're easy to grow. There are only a few herbs that are troublesome. Let's see. So some of the organic amendments that I use, organic fertilizer. I talked about some of them. There's something called green sand that can be used instead of blood meal if you prefer to do a more vegan approach. And however, green sand is harvested from the bottom of the ocean. It's like it is a rock, and so it is a limited resource. So that I kind of you go back and forth on that. There's things like feather meal, which literally is ground up feathers from chickens. But it has tons of nitrogen, and it's just if you want to use it. Chicken poop is awesome. I mean, but it needs to be composted. If it's too fresh, it's going to burn the plants, and that's with anything, except worm, because for whatever reason it's more mild. It doesn't. But I've noticed in the stores, there's a couple places, even Menards, I think, they have bags. It's called, I can't remember what it's called, but they have bags. It's chicken poop. I mean, that's basically what it is. I know.
No dog food?
No, because and the reason is, the reason is because dogs are meat eaters, and you don't want that in the garden because that will it'll attract pests and that sort of thing. I know somebody had asked you about composting. You had asked about composting. Now, I know, and if you have one of these, I hope it does work for you. But those barrel ones that roll. Compost really should have access, should be touching the ground because a little microbes and worms and all the buggy things that are flying around and you don't want to get, right in your face, but those are good for it. It's going to make it decompose faster. If you have the barrel kind, you already have one, I know they sell compost starter. All that is a soil, is what that is. That's all it is. It's a bag of soil, and because it has the microbes in it, and so you could just take a couple scoops of soil and stick it in there every so often if you already have one. If you don't, I would say maybe don't go that way. One compost bin I put in for someone, it was just a trash can, a rubber trash can, or rubber or plastic, whatever trash can, about this tall with a lid, and I took my drill and put like a hole cutter, for like doorknobs, and just put holes in it all around, cut the bottom out, and there you go. That's all it was. I stuck it in the ground, put a couple little stakes to hold it down, and you fill it up. It needs the air. It has a lid you can put on if you have like people over and you don't want to, I think actually it smells kind of good. It has that rich wood smell. It has that wood smell to it. But if you put in too much stuff you shouldn't, it could stink a little bit. So you can have a lid. You can leave the lid off so it can get some moisture. It's gonna get hot because it's that dark color, and that's what you want. And you don't have to turn it all the time. You can, if you turn it a little bit, you can take it, lift it up, and move it in another spot, and then you've got a pile of, compost. There are other ones. I've built cedar ones that are like this, except with gaps between them, and they're just boxes, about 4x4, and that also works well. It's just, it has to have light for the heat, it has to have air, and it has to have water. So those are the things that make compost happen. And no oils, no fats, no meat or meat byproduct. And if your compost stinks, that's why. That's what's going on in
So you
there.
just
You
throw
don't
your. Go ahead.
Yeah, go
You
ahead.
don't have to put like different things in them. That's what I heard. It has
There's a ratio.
leaves and
Yes.
then grass
Yes.
and then something else. or
Okay,
what-
there's a ratio that you should go with. It's 60, I think it's 60-40. 60% should be brown things, and the rest of it should be juicy. So, 60% dried leaves. If you have sticks, that's fine. They're not going to compost as quickly unless you can shred them up or cut them up somehow. Leaves are great if you run over them with a lawnmower, and just, in the fall, run over your leaves. Put them in there. Leaves are also awesome as mulch, which is something that we need to get on here, is some mulch, because the moisture stays in so much better. Again, just run over some leaves, but it should be the dry ones. The juicy stuff is, kitchen things, bananas and banana peels and carrot shavings and just everything that you can think of. Toast that you didn't eat as long as there's not butter on it, or moldy bread that you forgot about, or some crackers that are, that went bad or whatever. Just throw them in there. And
How much of wastage reduction we are doing right here?
say that again.
So how much of wastage reduction we are doing?
Yeah, I know. You think about it. You could get rid of half your trash service basically if you did a lot of it. A lot of the stuff I do is it does help. In fact, talking about starting things in the early spring, one thing you can use is a milk jug carton or 2-liter soda or whatever, and you just cut the bottom off, stick it over the top of this, get bigger, and there you go. You got a little greenhouse. That's all it takes, really. Except obviously it has to be bigger than that. You should have air for rain, and some holes for it to get air. But that's going to work like a greenhouse. If I kept this on here, this thing would be dead in a day probably, because it'd be so hot. But in the winter, it'd be perfect. You don't have to go to extremes about it with it. It's simple. If you let's see, what other things? Starting seeds. I know some of you probably start seeds. You don't have to buy the peat pots and the stuff, although I do sometimes. But I use old yogurt containers. I use like a little cream, like the little school lunch milk type size things. Those are great. I use, I just have a whole thing just with that. Another thing that's a recycle thing that is really amazing, and I actually accidentally did like a comparison test, is a mulch. Just use shredded newspaper. I used it at Capri. Do anybody know the restaurant Capri? I do their garden, and right now don't look at it because it's not. This week is when I'm putting a bunch of stuff in. But there, I did use some. I used shredded. I have a shredder, and I shred the newspaper, and I put it all around this area. And then I looked down the 120 feet of garden and thought, I'm not going to be able to shred that much newspaper. So I only did that part. The rest of it, I did straw to keep the weeds down. And I'll tell you what, the newspaper, there were no weeds at all. It's like it gets solidified a bit, but still it's light enough that it lets water through and everything. The straw was kind of a mess. We had to pick so many weeds out of there. The newspaper is amazing. And you don't have to shred it. You can just lay it down, but it's easier to place it if it's shredded, just because it's more.
Is it only newspaper, or it can be shredded paper or documents?
I shred my kids' homework and put it on there. I do, because my God, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, because we have all shredders at home,
okay.
so
You just don't want shiny stuff.
okay.
You don't want things that are like coated in And if you're shredding, I shred envelopes, but you got to take that clear window off.
Okay.
But I shred, all your junk mail that you can shred that, throw it in there. It's all, you can use it all. And in fact, I got to get shredding because I've got these piles. I kind of look like a hoarder right now because I've got piles of stuff that I need to shred. Let's see. And that works for anything, just for keeping it down. It doesn't, anywhere that you want to. Now, leaves are great too. And leaves add even more nutrients in that, so those are awesome as well. And that's something you can do in the fall when your garden is done. You've got all these leaves, these dead leaves on the ground. Grind them up, put them on there. If you have to mix them in a little bit so they don't blow away, go ahead. your soil is going to be great for next year.
Same thing even when we are mowing the lawns,
Yeah.
all the grass.
Yeah, the grass is good, but you have to wait till it's brown and dead, or it's too rich and it's going to burn your plants.
Oh.
Yes, but it doesn't take long. It'll kill them basically. It's too much nitrogen is the problem, and that'll just. I mean, it looks kind of like a burn. I mean, it gets like dead like that. What else?
How do you know when the compost is ready to be used?
Well, it should look like dirt, sort of. A bit. I mean, it's richer than that.
Yeah.
It's thicker. It's got loamy kind of feel to it.
Okay.
Yeah. You know what? I have used it when it's not done, and that's fine. It's just, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I've put it out when you could see like eggshells in
yeah.
it, and you could see stuff, but it will break down, and it
Okay.
will.
And
but
you just mix it in? Is that what you do? You put it around?
you can. You don't have to.
Okay. Just leave
Oh,
it.
yeah, that's a good point. There's something called side dressing, and that is just putting it around the plant, basically. You don't actually touch the plant with it. You just put it around it. Or if it's like the onions here, you just put it to the side and to the side over here. You have to remember that when you're adding fertilizer and amendments to soil, you're actually treating the soil and not the plant. It's just the soil that you're treating, so it doesn't have to touch the plant, because the plant is going to get the nutrients through the soil. It doesn't really do any good, that much good to put the compost right up against it. And again, if it's too strong, it might injure the plants a little bit. Now, there is something that I do, and I put together a basket of all these organic, and it's not vegan, because I don't have my rock phosphate, but I do have most of the vegan alternatives in there as well. I have something called, I don't know if you've heard of compost tea. Yes, no, some people have. Okay. Compost tea is basically, you make it like you make tea. You put a compost in water, let it sit for like an hour in the heat, in the sun, like sun's heat. And then you take the compost out or strain it out or whatever, and then you can water your plants with it. You can spray them with it, or you can just water it. If you're spraying the plants, the best time to do that is when it's cloudy or when the sun is just gone down and isn't on there, because you know this. Well, and also the plants, they when they respirate, when they let out air, you know this because she just went through master gardening. I know. The holes close up when it's really hot, so they don't lose their moisture. When the sun's down and when it cools off a little bit, the holes open up. So if you are actually going to be treating the plants with the compost tea. You spray them. Do it when it's like I said, dark or when the sun is going down or when it's cloudy, and it'll get more. That's like a quick shot of fertilizer for it.
So you're talking about the water after the compost has been filtered?
Yes,
That water?
That
Okay.
water. That's called compost tea. It's not too strong, but it's a nice little shot of good stuff, and it can be used on any other plants. I mean, you can just spray something, or like I said, you could just water it instead of doing a regular watering. Also, with watering, it's better to water once a week, a good long water, than water every day. The roots do better, because if you water every day, you don't water as much. The water only gets down so far. The roots are going to not go as far down to look for what they need. So one long water, I use soaker hoses mostly, because that's so easy. I've left for hours and forgotten, and come back and they're fine. You just turn it on just a little bit, just a little quarter turn or even less, and just you lay it in there, and it just waters it. It's good, unless you've had lots of rain. You don't need to worry about it.
Because that's for me, this is my first time having, an in-ground sort of garden to work with. And just because of, I know how lazy I get, and I'm trying to keep it like the lowest maintenance from
Yes.
at least the first year,
Yeah.
and then, if
Right.
I know that I keep up with it so much. So I was trying to decide, because I know I won't, thank God for that with watering, because I know I get to water every day or whatever.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, if I'm talking like a couple beds 2 feet wide, and I might only start with, growing 5 or 6 little things. But should I literally just, if I used it, I thought about buying a soaker hose and running, but I didn't know
how close
if
they
that's
need to
worth
be
it
and how
for
much.
what I'm doing, or if I should just give it. And when you say a good long
I
soak,
would-
how long? Should I hold the hose on it?
Well, I mean, you probably don't want to hold the hose that long. You know what I mean? And the thing is with sprinklers and that sort of thing and hose is like you're really kind of you're losing a lot of it to evaporation, especially when you're doing it in the heat like this. So I would totally recommend the soaker hose. It's really worth it because and then what you can do is run the soaker hose like in this size. I would probably like start it over there because it's near the hose, the end. Like you got to think about stuff like that because in the past I haven't, and it's like, oh my god, my hose doesn't reach where I open it. And just kind of loop it, and you can get these little things to hold it down, and then put your mulch up at the top of it. You don't have to touch it, you don't have to mess with it. You just hook up the hose once a week to it and let it go for like an hour or so.
So if I have a setup where I have like a foot between my garden
Yeah.
beds of just like grass, lawn grass, should I get like my hose is like over here by the house?
How long is this?
Each box is 6 feet long by 2 feet wide, so there's 12 feet on each side. So I'm wondering if I should like run up, and then if I do get one long soaker hose, should I put it down the middle of each
It's only
one?
2 feet wide. I think that would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that down the middle of 2 feet would be plenty. As long as you do a nice long. I would just get one soaker hose for here and one soaker hose for there. Yep.
Okay.
You can get 10
And
feet
they have
long.
diverters that you can like go off to one hose, from one garden hose.
I guess you could do that, or you could just unscrew it and do it another day.
Oh,
know.
okay? You can just switch off.
Yeah, yeah. And then, like I said, put your mulch over the top of the soaker hose. It'll hold it down, and the mulch will keep the moisture down. You know, it'll be good. You won't waste any of it.
And if I don't compost myself, just for me, I mean, what's the most generic? I mean, is there something I can just buy in the bag that will kind of serve my purpose, or should I
Yes.
do the tea thing?
Yeah,
or-
I mean, compost. The bags of compost are really just to be used when before you plant, or I mean, you can side dress with it during the year or during this growing season. But a bag would, I mean, that would get the soil to a good level, and especially since yours is in the ground, you don't really know.
I mean, it's got like wooden board. I mean,
Right.
it's up. It's got like.
Right, but it is using the
Inches of
ground
soil, but
more.
it's
It, like this one's not going to be using what's down
Right.
there. In fact, I put a landscape fabric underneath because all these things that they got cleaned out. But so you don't know what the pH. You don't know how much organic stuff it has in there. I would definitely recommend mixing in before you plant. Now, since it's too late, that's okay. Just go ahead and give it some tea. Tea, side dress a couple times depending on what it is. I actually really wanted to have this printout for you guys, and I ran out of time today to get it, but I do have it broken down. So if you want to leave an email address, I can email it to you. That
Well,
has
you know,
by
I would
vegetable.
prefer like I know organic is best, but I'm the type that I end up if I'm starting something out, I'm going to go to Lowe's and whatever the bag says. Oh, great for garden, But so what's like the difference between getting something like that and
Lowe's has
doing it?
everything except they don't have the worm castings. They have compost. They have composted manure is great with humus, which is like just extra fiber kind of stuff to it. Get a bag of that. That's fine. Bone meal and blood meal, all at Lowe's. What?
Smells really good.
Oh, yes, that's right. They do. They have the chicken coop stuff. Yep. Yeah. They actually have they got something called fish emulsion, which is also an awesome. It's great. It's a great fertilizer for both the tea thing. Yeah, or because that's liquid. A lot of times it's liquid, so you wouldn't actually have to make tea. You just mix it with water and spray it. That's very good.
Although I wonder, I already have an issue with a couple neighbor cats that keep coming over.
Don't do that.
I was going to say, I don't fish
Don't do that.
emulsion, man.
And I've
they're
actually
gonna
heard it does kind of stink a little bit. It smells like fishy, so I wouldn't do that. In fact, I put blood meal in here, and her dogs were like,
Well, that was going to be my next question. I know some people with dogs, but I do have neighbor cats that one of them thinks that my garden beds are their litter box. I haven't seen it every day, but a couple times. So I'm wondering, because I saw online that same thing with the PVC pipe, and I almost thought about doing something, but just doing something around it.
exactly. That's what I would do. I would take, whatever you want. You could take even bamboo pieces and stick it down as far as you can. There's bird netting you can get, and it's kind of hard to work with. It's tangly and whatever, but once you get it up, it'll be good. Just loop it weave the bamboo through it, stick that down as far as you can, and if you want, if you have a staple gun, you can just staple it a couple spots so it's in there so they can't get under. And this also will work for rabbits. And then just go around. I would do maybe 1/6, per.
And then when you go to harvest and take stuff out there, you gotta pull it off.
Yeah, but you know what? If you wove it through, then you can just slide it down. Yeah, make it easy on yourself. But that would work, and that would work for rabbits too. Walk through a spider web or something. Well, what other questions? I know other people have to have other questions. Are there certain? Yeah. Yes. I can send that to you if you give me your email. Here, I'll let you look at this. This beautiful thing that I worked so hard on. So like here, I'll just give each person if I have enough pages. Like, read through.
I can always get. I'm gonna give her my email.
Fine. She can.
That's pretty cool. Those are my favorite foods.
So it just tells you, plant next to, don't plant next to. Pardon? I don't have enough. Because every page
Here, they can have
have
one because I'll email
No,
it.
it's okay. Every page has different veggies on it. So like I was going to have like a pack of, like for all the basic ones that typically people do. And so it says, which ones do they like under companions? Don't plant with whatever. Seems like a lot of plants do not like to be planted next to potatoes. It's funny. I don't know. And yeah. And certain things maybe people already know, like tomatoes and basil. Love to be next to each other. Tomatoes and peppers, they like to be next to each other as well.
And they taste good too. They taste good too, tomato and basil.
Beans, there are certain things, there's quite a few things I have trouble with beans. One nice thing about peas and beans is that if you grow peas and beans in an area, you don't, the next time you plant something there, you're going to have lots of nitrogen in the soil because peas and beans,
Legumes.
they do not need any extra fertilizer because they actually make their own fertilizer in there. It's amazing. They need a little bit of fertilizer at the beginning, I guess, when you first plant them. When I send the pea and bean thing around, when I email it to you, you'll see. But also another thing is, I'm sure you've all heard of crop rotation. I mean, from when you learned about Native American and whatnot, and they did the crop rotation. Well, it's still true and important because certain fruits and vegetables suck certain nutrients out more than others. So you should always rotate it around. Lettuce needs a lot of nitrogen. Peas and beans put a lot of nitrogen into the soil, so it makes sense that after your peas and beans, the next time or if it's at the end of this is perfect too. If it's at the end of the season, your beans are done, it's cooling off a little bit, you're done with that harvest, mix the soil up a little bit, sprinkle some lettuce seeds there. You're going to have a cool harvest of lettuce before it gets chopped. I used a couple of them.
Do you also have something that says like what would be good to plant right now, like different times in the summer?
Well, I don't know if I have that written up, but there's
suggestions.
yeah,
I found
absolutely.
it online.
Yeah, okay, so like Betsy wanted spinach. I said, well, it's kind of late time for spinach, so let's wait and we'll plant spinach later. I have somebody that I just put her bed in yesterday, and she wanted broccoli, and I'm like, well, you can't do it yet because what you need to do, broccoli, you're going to plant the seeds in late summer,